Chapter 391. The castle-like mansion was massive and empty, so empty that one could hear his footsteps echoing against the walls. It was late at night. There were a few ancient wall lamps lit up, barely lighting up the darkness. A piano sound broke the silence, filling the mansion. It was the famous song, The Dream Wedding. Listening to the song in an eerie castle in the middle of the night was scary. It would have been a relaxing song if it was played in any other venues. Accompanied by the song, Chris ascended the stairs. He found it odd to meet up with the mysterious leader of Toxic Hive this way. Ethan, who was forced to stay in the yard, hid under the roof. He knew where the nearby surveillance cameras were. Hacking a surveillance camera was easy for him. It took him a few minutes to dysfunction them. The only scene that was shown on the surveillance footage should be the original scene. Ethan, who had observed the castle's structure, sneaked into the first floor through a pipeline. Like a nimble Black Panther, he moved his way through the darkness with ease. He heard the piano sound coming from the roof. The only daring person to play piano at this moment was Miss Rosa, who had never revealed her face before. Most of Toxic Hive's laboratories were built underground, so Ethan sneaked into the underground. As he had expected, the underground of the mansion was spacious. The width was at least 1,000 square meters, and it consisted of several floors. Hearing footsteps, he hurriedly hid in the corner near the stairs. Thanks to the dim light, he could see a man and a woman leaving with hurried steps. He heard the woman saying, "Why is Mr. Y here at this hour? Madam told us not to disturb her. Begonia and Leo are testing the medicines. I'm afraid he wouldn't be satisfied with only us serving him. There's nothing else we can do. Just bite the bullet and escort him to the backyard so we won't get in Madam's way." She sighed and grumbled while picking up her pace. Ethan frowned while wondering who Mr. Y was. He thought, fortunately, Leo is here. And Begonia, could it be her? His heart raced. Could Begonia be the person whom he had been looking for over 10 years? Whose death was the reason for his dreading sorrow? He swung between happiness and sadness when he found out that Leia wasn't dead. The further Ethan walked down the stairs, the lower the temperature dipped and the darker it became. He supposed that this place was just a temporary hideout because they didn't install an alarm system. That was why he could sneak into the place successfully. There were several rooms on every floor. The upper floors were accommodation, while the lower floors were laboratories. When Ethan walked to the end of the hallway, there were 2 rooms. He knew that it was highly possible that the person he was looking for was in there. He wasn't planning to alarm Leo and Begonia. Both of them were highly vigilant. He waited in the darkness for a while when one of the doors opened. A fox-masked woman appeared. Her physique was similar to the woman he saw that day. It should be her. She ascended the stairs hurriedly. Considering that Chris was still upstairs, Ethan didn't dare to take action. Otherwise, both of them might not be able to get out of here alive. Secretly, Ethan entered the laboratory. He could tell that they'd recently moved in at a last-minute notice. The simple laboratory wasn't completely equipped. There were some bottles, jars, and reports placed on the table. Elated with his findings, he quickly made a copy of the reports. While he was copying them, he noticed a bottle of medicine. It was labeled as M1. Chapter 392. Olivia was following Avery side by side. They were wearing the same mask. He had changed his sapphire ring into a green chrysoberyl ring. As she entered the castle, she could hear the piano playing from the rooftop. 2 crows happened to fly over them. The dim lights made the rosa flowers appear somehow eerie. It was almost summer, but Olivia's skin crawled when the wind blew. Avery lowered his voice. "Don't be afraid. Just follow me closely. You don't have to do or say anything later on." She hummed softly in response. After all, she was just here to confirm Leia's identity. The piano sounds suddenly stopped, and pin-drop silence filled the area. A man and a woman were running toward them. When they drew closer, Olivia noticed that they were wearing masks. Regardless, she managed to recognize them. It was Ryan and Jennifer. At this moment, Olivia was glad that she was wearing a mask, as it hid her vehement emotions. The fact that these two were here proved that she was getting closer to the truth about Leia. Panting, Ryan and Jennifer reached about 3 meters away from Avery and greeted him, "Mr. Y." Olivia stared at Avery's straight back as the light stretched his shadow on the ground. He rested his hands behind him. No one could see his expression, but the cold air around him could easily scare others. It seemed like everyone had their own identities in this world. Avery watched the two people, making them slightly uncomfortable. Even though they were wearing masks, Olivia could tell that Ryan and Jennifer were extremely anxious. Hence, she assumed that Avery was an incredible individual. Ryan explained, "Madam is currently handling an urgent matter, so she can't welcome you personally. We hope you can forgive us. Please come this way." Avery didn't utter a single word, yet his presence alone was enough to make one feel suffocated under the pressure. Olivia discreetly stared at his back, thinking that this was how a big boss should act. Olivia and Avery were led to a room. He took a seat while she remained standing, trying her best not to draw attention to herself. Ryan wasn't as haughty as he had been when he had kidnapped Olivia. His back was slightly hunched, as though he were at Avery's beck and call. An indifferent Jennifer served brewed tea before joining Ryan, acting like a careful child who had done something wrong. Avery played with his green chrysoberyl ring while saying indifferently, "I remember that you have a genius neurologist named Begonia. I would like to see her." Even though he was quiet, his voice was stern. Ryan and Jennifer exchanged looks. Ryan asked gingerly, "Dr. Begonia is on an important experiment. May I know why you would like to meet her?" Olivia had been wondering how Avery would get her to meet Begonia. But she had never expected him to be this straightforward. He was like a homeroom teacher, calling out the delinquent students. Ryan and Jennifer were prominent figures that everyone in the entire world was afraid of. Yet, they didn't have the guts to act haughtily in front of him. They seemed like they didn't even dare breathe too loudly. Avery answered softly, "You don't have the right to know that. You have 3 minutes. I want to see her." "Yes, sir. I'll bring her to you at this instant. Please give us a moment." Seeing how Ryan left with anxious steps, Olivia clenched her fists. She wondered, what kind of person is Avery? Why are they so afraid of him? Still, the thrill overpowered her curiosity. Leia was here, and Olivia was going to meet her at long last. Chapter 393. Soon, the door swung open. Olivia tightly grasped the hem of her sleeves. There was a switch between Olivia and Leia's positions. Olivia had found out that Leia was the mastermind, but Leia was clueless about Olivia's presence. Now that they were going to meet up in person, Olivia couldn't help but feel nervous. A woman in a white dress entered the room. She was tall and skinny. She was wearing a mask, but her exposed skin was as fair as snow. The sheer look of her figure alone was enough for others to guess how gorgeous the face under that mask was. Judging from how she was walking like a normal person, it seemed like she had been pretending to be a janitor who had a problem with her legs. She had even darkened her face to avoid grabbing unwanted attention. The breeze fluttered the hem of her dress, giving off the impression that she was a gentle and kind woman. Begonia stopped 3 meters away from Avery. Her voice was hoarse when she said, "Mr. Y, I heard that you were looking for me." It must be her original voice, which was different from before. It wasn't that mellifluous. It sounded as though her vocal cords had been injured before. Avery crossed his legs while turning his green chrysoberyl ring, exuding a cold, dominant air. His gaze swept across Ryan and Jennifer. "Get out." They were obviously slightly concerned about it, but they didn't dare to cross the line in front of Avery. Left with no choice, they walked out of the room. Now that there were only 3 of them in the room, Olivia tried her best to suppress her emotions. She remembered what Avery had said. Today, she was here only to confirm Leia's identity. Knowing how vigilant Leia was, Olivia intentionally hushed her breath. Leia, who was standing straight, didn't show any signs of fear despite being the only toxic hive member in the room. Avery rose from his seat and approached her. He stood before her and rested his hands behind him, staring at Leia coldly. "How have you been all these years?" She hung her head low, so no one could read her expression. "Thanks to you, Madam has been treating me well. I will never forget what you did to save me." Olivia's eyes widened as she realized that they knew each other. Furthermore, Leia was treating Avery with respect. I remember that you left when you were 11 years old, he recounted. Yes. He held up one of his hands before his chest. You were this tall back then. Leia curled her fingers to ball a fist. She uttered through her gritted teeth, yes. You've grown a lot taller, but you're as skinny as you were before. He reached out for her mask, intending to take it off. Leia reflexively moved to hold her mask, but in the end, she didn't stop him. Olivia was well aware that Toxic Hive members wouldn't remove their masks unless the other party was a close acquaintance. That was a mere knee-jerk reaction against Avery's action. When Leia got herself together, she didn't stop him. Avery pulled the mask to the back of her head. Leia could just about smell his faint body scent. Her heart was racing. Meanwhile, Olivia found it strange how such a daring woman could be this meek. When Leia's mask was slowly taken off, her hair covered half of her face. A nervous Olivia gulped. Avery raised Leia's chin, saying, "Long time, no see, little kid." Olivia was stunned the moment she saw Leia's face. Chapter 394. The dim light in the room shone upon Leia's face. Before this, Olivia had pictured Leia's face multiple times in her head. Judging from what Leia had done in the past, Olivia expected her to look evil and distorted. In reality, however, Leia had perfectly inherited the good looks from the Millers. She resembled her mother. Her face shape looked barely the same as Ethan's, but they looked like twins. Her features were sharp, and her long hair made her look cheerful. If Olivia hadn't known what Leia had done, she would have mistaken her for an innocent college student. The truth had finally come to light. Olivia had guessed it right. Leia was the mastermind. Her family, Jeff, and everything that she had suffered throughout the past 2 years crossed Olivia's mind. The sheer thought of those made Olivia want to carve Leia's heart out and devour every part of her body. Olivia had never done Leia any harm. Why would Leia do that to her? As of today, the bedridden Jeff had yet to regain his consciousness. Olivia's chest was rising due to anger. You're all grown up. Avery's voice comforted her emotions. Leia slightly blushed. Her lips parted as though she wanted to explain something. But she swallowed the words at the tip of her tongue and retreated to the side. Why did you want to see me, sir? Nothing in particular. I happen to be in Aldenvine, and I heard that you guys are here too. So I wanted to check on you. She pursed her lips. Thank you for your concern. I'm doing fine. I hope you don't blame me for leaving back then. That's your choice. I will never blame you. Aside from checking on you, I would like to have a consultation about medicine. Her eyes brightened at the mention of medicine. She hurriedly prompted, go ahead. Olivia observed Leia. It was obvious that the latter was treating Avery differently. She wondered if Avery was someone very important to Leia. The rooftop was covered with rosa flowers that blossomed into vibrant colors. Chris saw the woman sitting before the piano, playing the same song. She was wearing a black dress that was embroidered with rosa flowers, complementing her fair skin. Her finger played the last key with a touch of grace. The piano sound came to a sudden stop, letting the surroundings fall into dead silence once more. The woman didn't turn around. Chris took the initiative to break the silence. Madam, I'm here as you've requested. How was it? She asked out of the blue. He had so many questions about Chloe and Marina before coming here. But he was taken aback by her question. What? He asked, baffled. The piano piece. Chris had been feeling like there was a heavy weight on his chest this whole time. He wasn't in a state of mind to care about what piano piece she was playing. Could you play it again? He asked seriously. She chuckled softly. You haven't changed. As always, you don't know how to cheer women up. Other people would have complimented the performance regardless of whether they had heard it or not. He stared at the back of her head, wondering why her voice sounded the same as the woman in his memories. That was impossible. She had been dead for so many years. He had personally buried her body that year. He shook his head, shaking that idea off. She said, come, let's play it together. Chapter 395. Chris walked up to the woman anxiously. Is my daughter with you? She raised her head to look at him. The evil ghost mask covered her face. I'll answer that after you play the piano with me. Her voice sounded calm. He tried his best to suppress his anger. Knowing full well that members of Toxic Hive were ruthless, he couldn't take the risk of provoking her. The woman nudged to the side, and he seated himself next to her. He knew how to play the piano, but at his level, he could barely play the piece by reading the music sheet. When they finally finished playing the piece, Chris asked, "Did you kidnap my daughter?" She chuckled. "You sought me because of your wife, who's suffering from leukemia. She's in the ICU, isn't she? Can you save her?" "Of course I can. Otherwise, why would you be here meeting me?" She answered naturally. Chris didn't show any trace of joy, despite her affirmative answer. Alert, he asked, "What's your condition?" She let out a soft giggle before approaching him. "I do have a condition." He could smell her perfume due to their close proximity. It had a strong rose scent. A strand of her hair brushed across his face along the breeze, lingering with a faint flowery scent. He took a step back in reflex. The woman grabbed his hand. Her body temperature was lower than average. "What is it?" he questioned. "Sleep with me," she said slowly. His eyes slowly widened. Never in his wildest dream had he expected her to bring up condition. What did you say?" He thought that he was hearing Suaka things. Her hand slowly traced to his chest, caressing his throat intimately. "I said, spend the night with me, and I will save your wife." "How's that?" Frowning, he pushed her onto the piano without hesitation. The piano let out a dull sound. He stepped away from her. "Madam, please don't cross the line." Instead of getting angry at his fierce reaction, she was grinning from ear to ear. "You're as cold as usual." The longer he looked at her, the stranger he found her to be. She kept reminding him about the woman in his memories. Despite knowing that it was impossible, he asked, "Who are you?" She twirled her hair. "Give it a guess. Do we know each other?" Chris looked at her hand. Her skin was that of a young lady. Even if that person was still alive, she would be a middle-aged woman in her late 40s. There was no way she could have such smooth skin, no matter how good her skincare routine was. Thus, he instantly eliminated that possibility. She didn't answer that question. "Are you going to do it or not? If you're not, this marks the end of our negotiation. You may leave now." Chris was rendered speechless. He thought, "Is Miss Rosa out of her mind? How could she have such a strange condition?" She crossed her arms, watching him casually. "Let me do the math for a moment. Your wife has only 60 hours left. If you return home right now, you'll be able to make the necessary arrangements for a funeral in time." Furious, Chris grabbed her by the collar. "Are you behind what's happening to my daughter and wife? Do you want to kill me?" She smiled faintly. "If so, I will make sure that Marina won't be able to see tomorrow's sunrise." "Just what are you trying to do?" "What am I trying to do?" She grabbed a black cloth. "Cover your eyes and come with me." Noticing his hesitation, she added, "Do as I say, or your wife and daughter will die. Make your choice." Chapter 396. Leia thought that Avery was here to question her departure, but he wasn't. It didn't take long before he let her go. Avery and Olivia didn't leave the place because they knew that Marina was in the castle. They settled down in a room Ryan had arranged for them. After making sure that there were no hearing devices in the room, he asked, "What is it that you want to ask?" "Have you known her for a long time?" "Yeah, I saved her, but I kind of pitied her when I first met her. Most of her body was burned. Even half of her face was burned. That was why I wasn't that certain that she was the person you were looking for." She was baffled. No wonder her voice sounded kind of weird. Aside from the burns, she had a lot of wounds on her. "When I met her, she was barely alive. She was just skin and bones. Not a single part of her skin was free from burns. She only woke up after resting for half a year, and even then, she barely looked like a person." He shook his head. "Not long after that, she left Peace's embrace with the mutineers. I hadn't met her since then. Now that I think about it, I hadn't met her that much at all." Olivia said carefully, "So, you're..." He said, "You might have guessed it, so I might as well be honest with you. I'm one of the founders of Peace's Embrace. As I've told you, my initial intention was to help more people. But I didn't expect things to turn out this way in the end." Although Toxic Hive was founded a long time ago, they didn't dare to do things their way so obtrusively back then. They would still show me some respect. Only now did Olivia understand the whole story. She hadn't expected the person she had saved by chance to be a powerful individual. Thank you, Mr. Avery. It's getting late. You should get some rest. I'll get out of your hair, she said. Are you staying to look for Marina? Yeah, I want to know why Toxic Hive is harming her. I think she holds some secrets that I don't know. Avery sighed. I might as well help you to the end. They secretly left the room. It wasn't difficult to find Marina. The researchers were underground, so the huge castle was almost empty. The doctor on the shift looking after Marina was dozing off, so Olivia snuck into the room. The lights weren't turned on. There were only dim lights from the various medical appliances. She could scarcely see someone lying in bed. She wondered if that was Marina. Holding her breath, Olivia approached the bed. The person in bed wasn't sleeping. Alarmed, the person looked at Olivia when she heard the noise. Olivia turned on the torch on her phone and saw Marina. Every part of Marina's body was attached to pipes. She was wearing an oxygen mask. She looked so frail, as if she were basically hanging on to the last breath of her life. Marina's expression morphed into one of horror upon noticing a masked person standing by the bed. Olivia lowered her voice. It's me. Marina looked at Olivia in disbelief. Olivia took the chance to remove the oxygen mask. To her surprise, the first thing Marina said was, "Are you here to make fun of me?" No, Olivia denied. She couldn't understand how Marina could jump to that conclusion. Would she take the risk of coming this far just to make fun of Marina? Stop pretending. I bet you're happy to see me end up like this. Marina cried. This is my karma for ruining your family. That must be what you're thinking. I'm telling you, even if I turn out like this, he will still marry me. Olivia was astonished at how Marina was still thinking of threatening her at this point. Believe it or not, I'm not here to make fun of you. I had also been set up by Toxic Hive, just like you, Olivia explained. Toxic Hive, it's the same people who kidnapped us that day. Do you think that you're the person who drove Ethan and me to divorce? No, there was someone else involved in it besides the three of us. They ruined my family, and now they're trying to harm you and Mom. Olivia continued with gritted teeth. I resent you. But we share the same enemy this time. I hope you can tell me what happened that day. Why did Mom's illness suddenly become worse? And why were you involved in a car crash? Even though Marina loathed Olivia to the bone, she was left with no other option. Crying, she said, I'll tell you. I'll tell you everything. Chapter 397. Marina was reluctant to tell Olivia everything, but she had no better option. Hence, she revealed everything to Olivia. Olivia's expression changed after listening to her. You knew that your bone marrow was a match, but you didn't say anything. And you're planning to watch Mom's condition get worse until her time is up. Even if you didn't know about her identity, didn't you think that it was cruel to do that? You robbed me of my mother's love for so many years. What else were you unhappy about? The more she thought about it, the more furious she became. She couldn't understand how a person could be this cruel. She continued, even an adopted dog and its owner would have bonded after spending time together for so many years. Marina was crying so much that she could barely speak properly. I know that everything's my fault. But now's not the time to talk about this. If you really want to save me, just get me out of here. I have to donate my bone marrow to Mom before it's too late. Olivia held back the urge to slap Marina. Taking a few deep breaths, Olivia attempted to keep her cool. Don't worry, I'll get you out of here. It's not because of you, but to save my mother. But now's not the time for that. I actually snuck into this place. Marina said, Save my father. My mother, no, that woman is crazy. She's been plotting this for a lot of years, just to make him regret it. Dad was suffering from amnesia when he married her. After he recovered his memories, my mother was the only person he truly loved. That's why that woman bore resentment. She stole me away from them and raised me, filling my head with things since I was young. That was why I couldn't get over it after she faked her death and put all the blame on Mom. I saw Mom as an enemy and even made her barren. It was all that woman's fault. She manipulated me and tried to make me hurt Mom. Mom's suffering from leukemia because of that woman, too. Now, she's only one step away from achieving her objective. She's trying to make Dad regret letting her down. She spent so many years waiting for this. She wants to see Dad succumb to despair today. You must stop her. She will never let him off the hook. Marina tried to hold Olivia's hand. I know that it's almost impossible for me to survive this. But please, Olivia, I'm begging you. There was always something resentful about a pitiful person. Olivia had resented Marina the most in the past, but she couldn't do anything about it right now. Not only Chloe, but Connor's life also depended on Marina. If Marina died, Connor would lose his mother. Olivia said, I'll think of a way to save you. But you have to promise me that you'll live no matter what happens. Marina blinked. Even if she wanted to nod, she couldn't do it. All she could do to express her feelings was to plead with her eyes. Marina said, I know. I will stay alive to save Mom. You have to get me out of here as soon as possible. That woman is feeding me drugs that can worsen my condition. Mom doesn't have much time left. If you help me out, I'll tell you a secret in exchange. Olivia glared at her, not expecting Marina to be this cruel. Got it. I shouldn't be staying here for too long. I have to go. She roughly checked on Marina's condition and left. In truth, she could hardly calm herself. She never imagined the truth to be this cruel. If Marina was Chloe's biological daughter, who were Olivia's parents? What exactly happened that year? Were her parents aware of her existence? Chapter 398. Olivia left the room, her head filled with questions. Right then, Avery covered her mouth and dragged her to the side. He smelled of scented candles, so she wasn't that surprised when he suddenly dragged her away. She was curious about what he was going to do. He gave her a look, hinting at her to look downward. They were standing by the balcony on the second floor. There were two people standing on the lawn downstairs. Although one of them was facing his back to Olivia, she recognized him easily. It was none other than Ethan. He was grabbing the wrist of a skinny woman in a white dress. It was Leia, whom Olivia and Avery met not long ago. Ethan's objective was to root Toxic Hive out. Thus, there was a chance that he had long known that that woman was Leia. The realization made Olivia break into a cold sweat. She shook her head immediately. Ethan loved her. He would never lie about that. Thus, she believed that this was a coincidence. It was possible that he had found out the truth recently. However, reality soon proved her wrong. Let go of me, Leia demanded coldly. Leia, I know that it's you, Ethan said with much difficulty. You don't have to deny that. If you didn't care about me, you wouldn't have risked your life to stop Leo from killing me. I've asked someone to perform a DNA test on Jody. Leia faced her back at him. Her expression remained hidden under the mask. What's the point of doing that? Just pretend that your younger sister was long gone a long time ago. Saying that was no different from admitting that she was Leia. By now, Olivia's back was covered with a cold sweat. Ethan had long known the truth. In fact, it seemed like he had known about it even before she had found out. So the person who had dug up Jody's grave was none other than him. Yet, he had been deceiving Olivia. Not only that, but he had also tried to talk her out of pursuing the truth. And it was because he couldn't accept the truth himself. It was no wonder that he made soup for her, that he claimed that they could have babies in the future, and that he had been accommodating her recently. There had been so many hints all the while. Ethan had realized that he had wrongfully blamed Olivia and the Fordhams all this time. He was pleasing her out of guilt. He had even chosen to deceive Olivia to protect his sister. Olivia hadn't been this crestfallen since the day he had brought up divorce and the day she had lost her baby. It had been winter back then. The cold breeze had shrouded her, biting her skin. She remembered feeling cold all over. The cold had even seeped into her heart. It had hurt so much that she had barely been able to breathe. Now, she was going through the same pain. It was all because of the same person, too. Tears ran down her cheeks. Previously, Ethan had crushed Olivia's heart to pieces. Now, he had stabbed her right from the back. He had completely lost her trust. She reined her emotions in, trying not to let out any noise. She reckoned that Ethan was happy right now. No one knew how much he loved Leia better than her. Leia, tell me, what made you turn out this way? If you weren't dead, why didn't you return home earlier? Do you know how many places I've searched for you? Ethan turned her around. Tell me, where have you been and what have you been up to these years? Even though he had finally found Leia, what he wished to know wasn't the reason why she had treated him this way. Olivia could make up excuses for Marina's matter, but she could never clear Leia's name for all the things she had done. In the past, Olivia had thought that Ethan genuinely loved her with all his heart. But it now seemed like a joke to her. Chapter 399. Olivia turned and left. She didn't listen to the conversation any further. She would be insulting herself if she stayed and listened to them. She had loved Ethan for many years, and it had turned into a mere joke. Even though Leia had ruined Olivia and her family, Ethan still called Leia's name so gently. Olivia recalled that night they had almost injected poison into her body. She could have died back then. Now, even the sound of Ethan breathing was repulsive to her. He kept saying how much he loved her and promised to give her an answer to everything. In fact, he had been eliminating evidence to prevent her from finding out the truth. She wondered if this was his way of loving her. Olivia left the balcony with a piece of rock. The idea of smashing Ethan's head with it crossed her mind for a brief moment. She took a deep breath and didn't look back. Your younger sister was long gone. I'm just a living zombie. Leia's voice was hoarse. She no longer pretended to be someone else. Ethan noticed how monotone her voice was. He could still remember how adorable the young Leia had been. She was still young right now, but why was she carrying such a sad bearing like an old person? I know that it's you, Leia. Tell me, why didn't you return home? You knew that Liv was your sister-in-law. So why did you do those things? She broke free from his grasp. Yeah, I was the one who did all of those things. If you want to avenge her, you can kill me. I have no will to live anyway, she said firmly. She seemed unafraid of the consequences of her past deeds. Ethan was baffled. You didn't even know Liv. Why did you ruin her family? He had been picturing their reunion for the past few days. But none of his imaginary scenarios came close to reality. Leia wasn't even explaining her stance. Her sole wish was to die. So what if I ruin them? What's done can't be undone. Either you kill me or let me go and pretend that you don't have a younger sister to begin with. She was going to leave, but he yanked her back and slapped her in the face. Her mask fell to the ground from the force of the hard slap. He hadn't held back at all, so the edge of the mask accidentally cut her face. Ethan looked at the unfamiliar face. Her smooth skin was free from wrinkles, but something seemed odd. It was as if she hadn't been born with that appearance. If one took a closer look at her face, they would be able to tell that she had received plastic surgery. Ethan asked, how could you be like this? Leia, do you know how long I've been searching for you after you were kidnapped? And how sad Mom was. She missed you so much that she suffered from depression. She's been receiving treatment abroad for many years, but she showed no sign of recovery. Since you were still alive, why didn't you return home? Grandma's greatest regret was not being able to see you before she passed away. The yellow light reflected the tears in Leia's eyes. She covered her face with one hand as she began crying. There's no more turning back. Can't you pretend that you never saw me? Not a chance. I've finally found you after jumping through so many hoops. You're coming home with me. She took an alarm device out. You better leave if you don't want to die here. As I said, there's no more turning back. Chapter 400. Chris was still in the castle. Ethan didn't want to cause him trouble at such a critical moment. So he didn't provoke Leia. Now that he had met her, the mixed feelings that were churning in his stomach eventually morphed into disappointment. He couldn't understand how the adorable girl from his childhood had turned into this kind of person. Did you get plastic surgery? Ethan questioned. Compared to Leia, Jody the Miller's more. He had too many questions he needed answers for. Yes, she coolly admitted. As long as he was the one asking, she wouldn't hide the answers from him. Why? She avoided his gaze. I have nothing to tell you. You shouldn't be here for too long. Leave. Pretend that you never met me. He blocked her way. It's fine if you don't want to come home and don't want me as your brother. But you should at least tell me why you hurt Liv. Why did you hurt innocent people? When you were young, you couldn't even eat for days after your kitten died. How could you become like this? He could still remember how upset Leia had been at that time. That was why he had stopped Olivia from bringing Snowball with her. Snowball reminded him of that sad incident. Leia smiled faintly. Are you sure that I was sad because the kitten died? She raised her chin and smiled. I fed it sleeping pills because it kept meowing at night. It was so annoying. It was a pity that it died so soon. I had only fed it sleeping pills for 3 days. He had never seen her smile so coldly before. Now, she seemed like a total stranger to Ethan. That was why he hadn't been able to recognize her, even though she had been so close to him all these years. Why did you kill it? You could have given it to someone else if you didn't like it. Who was going to keep me company then? You were busy, and Mom sometimes acted out of character due to mental illness. Don't bring up Dad. He rarely came home. That kitten was the only toy I had to kill time. She referred to the kitten as a toy, instead of a playmate. Ethan, have you always thought of me as a lovely sister? But I'm not. Haven't you always wanted to know what kind of person I am? I'll tell you now. She smiled coldly and continued, our family is the top elite family, but it's uncommon to have a mentally ill mother. And why didn't Dad ever show up? Grandpa was preoccupied with maintaining our family's position, while Grandma was his best helper. This family has always been cold. You were the only person who treated me well. But you had so many lessons every day. You couldn't look after me. I knew that I was different from my peers since I was young. They were like kittens and puppies. Delicious food and toys were enough to make their day. But what did I experience? I witnessed my mother attempting suicide when I was 3 years old. And it wasn't just once. At this point, tears were glistening in Leia's eyes. She slightly raised her head to stop the tears from falling down her cheeks. Ethan, back then, Mom was covered in blood when she hugged and strangled me. She also told me that I wasn't supposed to be born. Do you know what that felt like? Everyone keeps saying that mothers love their daughters. But why did she want me dead? While you were away, she tortured me a lot of times. She loved torturing me until my last breath whenever we were alone. That was how she could get a good night's sleep. The next day, she would wake up and hug me tightly, apologizing and promising not to do it again. Domestic abuse and cheating are similar. There's no stopping it once you start. She would torture me whenever she acted out of character. And I was used to letting the steam off by torturing the kitten. Why didn't you tell me? Ethan couldn't help but feel guilty. Their mother had suffered from mental illness for a long time. But he had never known that Leia had been inhumanely tortured when she was a child. Leia answered, would that stop the torture? I could only end it by leaving the family. He looked at her in disbelief. You mean you left of your own accord that year?